Our guest today is Len Bierbrier. He is a founder and CEO of Lexington-based Bierbrier Development, who has focused exclusively on retail real estate during the last 45 years. Len is a Harvard Business School graduate many years ago, and he has watched this industry very meticulously, very carefully, and have carved out a very special niche in the market. We are going to talk to him about his niche market and then other retail trends today in the retail real estate industry. Len, thank you very much for coming.
My pleasure.
And welcome to our studio. So let us start with your niche. In this marketplace, you are very well known for your specific things you look when you buy a property or when you develop a property. So tell us about that first.
Sure.
And then how your particular niche has changed during the last 45 years.
Well, our company specializes in needed goods and services, service convenience shopping centers, meeting daily needs, whether it's drugstores or restaurants or health and wellness stores of that character, and we focus on locating them where there's the largest number of customers, trade area, close into Boston. So we have a variety of centers in what we call the inner suburbs, and what we're trying very much to do is to avoid those tenants that sell stuff, because the internet clearly is going to make stuff more easier to obtain. But the daily needs, whether it's pharmaceuticals or restaurants, things of that kind, people have to go out and get them. So we try and put our centers very much in the middle of where those people are, easily accessible, plenty of parking, and we try and market them at fair market, sustainable rents, and frankly, over the years we've had very little turnover. I can point to many tenants that have been with us for 20 and 30 years. And of course, there is a trend in the demographics where people are moving to be closer in, and so we have benefited from that.
So what are some of the examples of your properties, if you can give an example
Sure.
of?
Well, I think that the first one we did was in Medford, in Wellington Circle, and anchored by a CVS store, 24-hour store, that is doing volumes that are absolutely the top of their grade, 3 times the national average for drugstores, because we have over 400,000 people within 3 miles in all income ranges. We're at the intersection of 2 highways that are the very busiest. It's the very busiest intersection in the state of Massachusetts, not counting interstates. There's over 200,000 cars a day that go by our shopping center, which is at the corner, and we have 5 curb cuts. So it's very easy to get to, very easy to get in and out of, plenty of parking, and virtually all the merchants there have been dramatically successful.
Excellent. What about an example of some of the new projects you have done?
Well, the most recent one actually was not new construction. We purchased a center in Braintree last year, similar size to Medford, and it was facing the South Shore Plaza, and the unique aspect of it was it's the only open-air center opposite a very successful regional mall. So for those tenants who are not mall tenants, we had a monopoly, which is what I saw. We competed against 10 institutions to win that property, but we won it with the vision that this is really the only place to go. And so we have a large waiting list now there, and with the exception of 2 merchants that sell stuff It's all service convenience, and they're extremely successful. So we're very pleased with that acquisition.
So now let us talk about some trends and
Sure.
what is happening in the marketplace. My first question to you is that in the last 45 years, what has changed in retail
Sure.
and what has not changed?
Well, the fundamental rules of retail are that you have to have a location that works for that time. So 30 and 40 years ago, people would build shopping centers anchored by a supermarket, anchored by a discount store, anywhere out on the highway. Very few people, and with the buildup of the interstate system in the 50s and 60s, that worked just fine. The change now is that people are more motivated, particularly the millennials and older people are more motivated to move closer in. So some of those faraway centers really aren't as successful. They're in B and C markets, not as desirable, higher risk. When you see regional and national tenants come to Boston today, they don't want to know very much about outside 128. There's a real drop-off in desirability because they're looking for that density of population, whereas in the origin of the shopping center business, density was much wider, people drove much further. Today, transit-oriented developments, where there's public transportation, are quite important, and the mechanism for developing this stuff essentially has eliminated those two anchors, the department store and the supermarket. Now the department store is in a regional mall, and the supermarket is much smaller and wants to be closer in. And whereas 30 years ago, banks wouldn't talk to you unless you had your anchors signed before you did financing, today, anchors, which would be subsidized anyway and wouldn't add to profitability, are not necessary if your location is within a trade area where there's clear demand. And here in the Boston area, the barriers to getting permits are so high that if you can get a permit, the financing will follow if the locational value is there. And that locational value is defined by density rather than by access far away on a highway.
So let us stay for a few seconds on the financing part. So of course, we have gone through several cycles of recession last few decades. How the financing market has changed for the retail properties?
The financing market has changed dramatically. When I started out in this business, one of my mentors said to me, if you have to put money in the deal, it takes the fun out of it. Today, that's not the case. It's very difficult to do a deal where you don't have money in it. And what that's led to is that there really isn't much either built or bought without third-party capital, because the numbers are so much larger now. There's a much smaller role for entrepreneurs like when I started, where you could kind of cobble everything together without partners. Today it's extremely difficult. Now, the rules of finance just this year are changing in terms of Basel III and the risk retention rules that the conduits are facing. Even the lenders have to have some risk position in the loan. They just can't sell it off like they did pre the Great Recession, where they were basically just brokering to some faraway capital source and then everything disappeared. They have to maintain a position. That's coming into force in December. So there's a lot more capital required from the developer perspective, and even the lenders now have to look at it more carefully. So I think that, and coupled with the recession, there has been little building, and there will be less aggressive building going forward. But in a way, that's a good thing, because on a global scale, we are overstored in this country. There's over 7 square feet per individual in this country compared to 1.7 in Japan and 1.3 in the United Kingdom. There's too many stores. And so now you see a change in the existing stores and a slowdown in new ones. And the existing ones are being impacted dramatically by the internet. The internet, depending on who you listen to, accounts for 12 to 15% of retail sales, and there are projections that in the next 10 or 15 years it'll be as much as half of retail sales. And what that's done is it's really destroyed many of the classic merchants that are not with us anymore. I guess the best example of a big box that went out this year is Sports Authority. Less than 5 or 10 years ago, we had big boxes lined up next to each other, and that was the next new thing. Today, you're either going to see very successful regional malls, or you're going to see very successful, dense retail centers, which I'm really fortunate to be a part of. But the secondary and tertiary markets are much higher risk, and particularly with the rise of Amazon, the retailers, who have to move very, very quickly to keep up, they're now fighting back. The trend in retailers, particularly in the last 2 years, is that there is a omni-channel distribution, so they're fighting back. Penny is really working very hard with their online sales. Best Buy came out with earnings just, I think, today, or maybe it was yesterday, where their online sales are up 24%. So they're competing with Amazon on online, sure. And yet the bricks and mortar, they're doing a much better job in terms of the quickness of checking out, the availability of inventory. They're really being much more careful about their goods.
So now, for example, we talked about the financing situation, sure. for the developers, and you see the technology, how it is impacting, and also some of the retailers are trying to do a lot of this stuff through
sure.
online as well. What this all tells about the future of the structures of the buildings?
Well, the one trend that's very clear is the merchants that we've always relied on, whether it was the anchors of historically on the highways, they're gone. But today's anchors in the regional malls are slipping away, Sears, Kmart, and they're dividing up their stores to either the new merchants, the H&Ms of the world, but also there is a trend, both in the regional malls and in the strip centers, where experience that the consumer has is very, very important. And this led to the rise of an enormous number of restaurants, entertainment, theaters, the fast casual segment. For the first time this year, restaurant sales are greater than supermarket sales nationally. And you look at something like a Len Marketplace that was developed in the past few years, they have a dominance of restaurants.
Sure.
The numbers of people eating out is greater, particularly amongst the millennials and the seniors. They're eating out much more than ever before. And what we saw was, the quick service McDonald's of the world are now under severe competition from all kinds of different niches, whether it's, as I said, the fast casual. Panera didn't exist 10 or 15 years ago. They're a multi-billion-dollar company today. So that experience, whether it's within shopping in a mall environment or in a downtown environment, that social experience is very important. We're looking right now at restaurants with outdoor seating. Outdoor seating has that feeling that's so important.
Sure. So Len, in this retail war today, internet, traditional retailers, who is going to win in the long run? Is it Amazon or is it the traditional tenant?
I don't think there's going to be a clear-cut winner. The popular conversation is that the retail stores are going to be Amazon. But the fact of the matter is that at the beginning, Amazon had a great experience, but even now Amazon is opening up retail stores because reaching the customer on a personal experience basis is still very important. The likelihood is that their market share will increase probably 30, 40, maybe even as much as 50% of retail sales. But the fact of the matter is that the human behavior requires some experience. That buying process has to have an experience. If there's no social experience, yes, you can click, but that's not the totality of human behavior. People still like to go out and be with people. People still have daily needs. And the retail stores are not sitting back. They are fighting back with not only online experience, but also within the stores. They are providing much of what Amazon, the quick delivery they're providing, the wide assortment of goods, they're providing the instruction. Yes, they are warehouses if someone's going to come in and then click on Amazon, but there's still a human behavior of wanting that social experience in buying. And coupled with, as many of the retailers are doing, they are including restaurants and bars and hair salons and all kinds of other interactive processes that they're coupling with the buying experience.
Now, this is a very trivial question, but I'm going to ask you is, if I am a recent graduate of Harvard Business School, MIT Center for Real Estate, or Boston College coming out, and I have this big dream that, you know what, I want to be a big retail developer. What are the 5 advice you will give it to this person?
The ability to succeed is probably bounded by a few parameters. One is determination. It is a very difficult road, and you absolutely have to be determined to get to the end and really believe that you have the ability. You have to have a passion for it because there's so many hurdles in the way. I think that working hard is a given, but you must get lucky. Having the ability to pivot very quickly is important because the changes are much more rapid now.
Sure.
So the life cycle of the development, by the time you get to the end, it may not be what you planned on to begin with. And as I said earlier, staying power, it makes it very difficult for an individual entrepreneur because you have to stay alive in the development process, which could take 24, 36, 48 months. And so having the capital to be self-sustaining, and then with the new financing rules where you have to actually put money in your deals, and the numbers are so much larger because the deals are closer in where the land values are higher, and vertical development is much more prevalent, so the numbers just get so large. It's very difficult for, whether you're a high school graduate or Harvard Business School, it's very difficult to put together all of these things without access to third-party capital. And that's one path. The alternative path is to develop expertise in a job that, whether working for a retailer, working for a developer, and gaining credibility so that you can have an easier task of raising that capital, or in fact get the expertise that a development company looking for an experienced person will bring you on board, where you get a minority interest in future work. So it's a spectrum. You can go on your own, you can establish your credentials, you can then go on your own, or
Sure.
join another development company.
And how do you look at the role of brokers in the future?
Brokers are very important, and that's changed dramatically. When I started out in this business, the role of the broker was basically to get a listing and then try and find a tenant, a retail tenant. And I was a retail broker for 10 years before I actually went into the ownership role, so I had a familiarity with that. But what I saw then was that the retailer, who had these massive real estate departments, really needed some local expertise. And so if you can establish some credibility, as I was fortunate enough to establish with a number of large retailers coming here, understand their criteria and then go around and co-broke with the guys that have the listings. Since that time, things have changed. The retailers have eliminated their real estate departments, and what has happened now is the listing brokers have now effectively become tenant rep brokers. So, for example, a large national retailer will hire a master broker somewhere in the country, and that master broker who represents that retailer will then farm out in each of the different markets to a local broker who will be the tenant rep, and he will contact the developers. I am representing XYZ Corporation, and the developer has no choice but to deal with them. That started, my recollection is, with when the anchor tenants had captive developers. So now the retailers have captive tenant reps.
Yeah.
And that's been that change over time.
So, Len, who is the ideal tenant today?
What we look for when we are screening tenants, and we have desirable property, so we get an opportunity to look at a lot of tenants. The single most important thing from our perspective is that the tenants be good merchants, that their business model be currently viable. Business models come and go, and as a developer, you have to be on top of it. In the years of the video, we had all the video chains were our tenants. That trend went out. Following the trends and finding out who's on top of it is very important. This year we signed 4 urgent care tenants because that's the cutting edge. Understanding what's working in the marketplace and being ahead of that is very important. Just filling space because someone's going to pay the rent doesn't work, because there's inevitably going to be turnover, instability, collection problems, maybe even litigation. And the ability to filter that someone will be a long-term tenant is very important, because then you can get your job done and move on and do the next one, as opposed to spending a lot of time just dealing with turnover.
Len, thank you very much for your time.
Okay, good.
And all the best for your future endeavors.
Thank you. Well, it's been a pleasure.